History isn't a timeline, it's a crime scene that's been scrubbed clean. In the mid-1800s, the world didn't just change, it reset. We're told this was the era of horse-drawn carriages, oil lamps, and soot-covered chimneys. But buried beneath the great mud are blueprints for technology that shouldn't exist and maps of cities that have been surgically deleted from your textbooks. They call it the Progressive Era, but the archives tell a much darker story of forbidden energy, impossible architecture, and a global catastrophe that was rewritten as urban renewal. If the 19th century was so primitive, why are historians so terrified of what happens when we look too closely at the dirt? Buckle up. We're digging up the secrets they tried to bury forever. Number 1. The mud flood and the buried first floors. Walk through any major city today, London, Chicago, Moscow, or San Francisco. Look down, not at the pavement, but at the windows peeking out from the sidewalk. Thousands of grand old world buildings feature elegant arches and heavy stone frames half submerged in the earth. Historians call them light wells, built that way for ventilation. That's the official story. The ironic reality, these aren't basements. They are the original ground floors of a civilization that was literally swallowed by the earth. Across the 1800s, millions of tons of mud supposedly migrated across the globe, burying the first levels of entire metropolises. In Chicago, they famously jacked up the city to install sewers, but the sheer scale of the operation feels like a cover-up for something much more violent. Why is there no record of where this dirt came from? No news reports of a global landslide. It's as if a massive tectonic hiccup occurred and the survivors simply decided to build on top of the debris and pretend the bottom half never existed. We see photos from the mid-1800s, gigantic ornate cathedrals and sprawling government palaces surrounded by unpaved muddy tracks and horse dung. The math doesn't add up. How did people with wooden carts and shovels build megalithic structures that we struggle to replicate today? The twist is simple. They didn't build them. They inherited them. And then they spent the next century making sure you never asked who the original owners were. Number 2. The wireless ghost grid. Look at the rooftops in 19th century photographs. Before the mess of power lines and telephone wires, the skylines were bristling with something else. Ornate spires, metallic domes, and power stations that look more like cathedrals than factories. The official narrative says these were just architectural flourishes, meaningless iron spikes designed for aesthetics. But if you look at the schematics, they bear a haunting resemblance to modern antennas and resonators. In the 1800s, atmospheric electricity wasn't a fringe theory. It was a reality. Antique lithographs show street lamps that glowed without a single wire connected to them. The twist? Nikola Tesla didn't invent wireless power. He was trying to bring back a system that was already being dismantled. Historians ignore the ether, the invisible medium that the ancients believed fueled the world. Instead, we're told our ancestors burned coal and whale oil because they were primitive. But if they were so backward, why did they build massive star forts across every continent? Structures that look exactly like giant circuit boards when viewed from above. These weren't just forts for defense, they were massive energy harvesters, grounding the frequency of the Earth itself. The irony is thick. We pay monthly for electricity that was once as free as the air we breathe. By the late 1800s, these spires were being torn down, replaced by the metered, wired, and profitable grid we're trapped in today. They didn't just give us light, they gave us a bill and deleted the evidence of the free world that came before. Number 3. The instant cities of the world's fairs. In the late 1800s, dozens of massive shimmering cities appeared across the globe almost overnight. Chicago, St. Louis, San Francisco, they called them World's Fairs. The official story is that these were temporary expositions built to showcase human progress. But look at the photos. These weren't plywood and plaster shacks. They were sprawling marble-like metropolises with massive domes, Roman colonnades, and intricate statues that would take decades to carve today. The narrative claims they were built in just 18 to 24 months by workers who, again, were using hammers, nails, and horse-drawn carts. Then the twist that makes no sense. As soon as the fairs ended, they blew them up. They dynamited these architectural masterpieces or let them accidentally burn to the ground. Why would a struggling society spend billions in today's money to build a temporary city, only to destroy it 6 months later? The irony is staggering. They told us these cities were fake to explain why they had to disappear. In reality, these were likely existing old-world cities, surviving remnants of a global empire that had been reset by the mud. The fairs weren't a celebration of the future, they were a liquidation sale of the past. The crowds in the photos look small, out of place, wearing heavy wool coats in the summer, wandering through streets they clearly didn't build. And the strangest part? The foundling hospitals and orphan trains that followed these fairs. It's as if they were repopulating empty cities with a new generation that had no memory of what came before. History isn't written by the victors, it's written by the people who inherited the keys to a kingdom they didn't earn. Number 4. The year the sun died. Imagine waking up in the middle of July to a landscape covered in 6 inches of charcoal grey snow. In 1816, this wasn't a nightmare. It was the reality for the entire Northern Hemisphere. They call it the year without a summer, and the official explanation is a convenient one: the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia. Case closed, right? Not even close. The archives from that year describe dry fogs, so thick they reddened the sun and obscured the stars for months on end. Historians mention the crop failures and the famine, but they rarely talk about the red snow that fell in Italy or the blue rain reported in Hungary. This wasn't just a volcanic hiccup, it was a total atmospheric collapse that felt more like a nuclear winter than a natural disaster. The irony is almost cruel. While the common people were boiling nettles and eating their horses to survive, the elite were busy redrawing the maps of the world behind closed doors. This impossible weather perfectly lines up with the sudden disappearance of historical maps showing Grand Tartaria, a massive empire that occupied most of Asia and North America. The twist: if you want to reboot a planet and install a new history, you don't just win a war, you starve the survivors until they're too weak to remember who they used to be. We're told the 1800s were the dawn of the modern age. In reality, they look more like the aftermath of a global cleanup crew, erasing the fingerprints of a civilization that got in the way of the New World Order. The weather wasn't broken, it was being used as a weapon of mass erasure. Number 5. The architect of the Great Reset. We are taught that the 1800s was the century of invention: steam engines, telegraphs, the light bulb. But when you look at the evidence, a darker realization begins to take shape. The 19th century wasn't an era of discovery, it was an era of recovery. We didn't invent this technology, we found it in the ruins of the world that came before the mud, the winter, and the fires. The industrial titans like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan didn't build the future, they just secured the patents on the past. They took the free energy of the atmospheric grid and put a meter on it. They took the grand architecture of the old world and called it temporary, so they could replace it with soulless concrete. The ultimate twist? The most effective way to enslave a population is to give them a fake history and tell them they're the most advanced generation to ever live. We look back at the people of the 1800s and feel pity for their primitive lives. That is the greatest trick ever pulled. The irony is that while we stare at our screens, the literal foundations of a superior civilization are still buried just 10 feet under our feet. Historians aren't scared because the facts are missing. They're scared because the facts are right there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to stop believing the script. The 1800s wasn't the start of the modern world. It was the end of a better one. Sleep tight, knowing that the floor you're standing on might just be the ceiling of a truth they can't afford for you to find. That's all for today. Subscribe if you love discovering the dark side of everyday life.